Okay, so I have had a seriously flittering ADHD brain today, and it's taken me quite some time to dig through these things, because I would be on this topic and then I'd have this question and I'd go research that, and then I'd print a map, and then I'd think of something else and research that, and then I'd find another map and I'd print that too, and then I'd find out I was out of ink, and then I'd order ink. Oh, it's been a thing. It's been a day. So anyway, here we are, and I am loving all the things that I found. So let's look at it. So I said yesterday, in yesterday's recording, that I'm not reading the chapters. What I meant by that was I'm not reading it in the live stream. I am reading the chapters. I'm just reading them to myself. And as I wonder about things and have questions about things, I go and research them. And if they're interesting enough to pass on to you, then that's what I do. I am reading the chapters. I'm just not reading them in the stream. So we are, as we discussed yesterday, the fact that Exodus in the Hebrew Bible is Shemot, if I'm saying that right. Yep, Shemot, and it means names. So I'm just determined to be inquisitive about the names. These things happened unto them and are preserved in this book as ensamples for us. They are instruction and admonition, and they were not trying to be Bible characters. They were not trying to be what some of us would call Bible heroes. They are just living their lives, just like me and you are living our lives. We're just trying to get through the day, trying to, clean the house, trying to study the Bible, and you've got ADHD brain, trying to worry about, this family member or that friend, or they're just trying to get through their day. But the Lord preserved their story because there was something about it that we could learn from. And they become symbolisms of the New Testament church life that we're living today. For instance, you have in the New Testament, him talking about the children of Israel going through the Red Sea and through the cloud. That's symbolic of baptism. They weren't trying to create a symbol for baptism. They were just trying to save their own skin. God was providing a miracle that would be preserved for us. Okay? So with that in mind, Exodus chapter 2 starts with a man of the house of Levi. So the house of Levi, if you remember from yesterday, Jacob's sons, one of them was named Levi. Okay? And Levi means joined to. And we're going to find later how the tribe of Levi, so Levi became more than just a man. His family unit became a tribe, as did every one of these sons of Jacob. And so Levi means joined to. And they became a tribe of priests. Levi's tribe became the priesthood later. We'll get there later. But I love that his name means joined to. And that is still the act of the ministry today, to join people to God, to God's laws, to God's insights, to join people. How cool is that this happened, right? So Levi means joined to. And Levi took a wife, a daughter of Levi. So that means she was also of the tribe of Levi. And the man's name, we don't find it here. I don't remember where, I forgot to write down the reference, but we do have their names, Amram and Jochebed, later. I'll write it down later. I'm sorry, I forgot to write it down. But Jochebed is the wife's name. Amram is the man's name. And Amram means exalted people. And Jochebed means Jehovah is glory. And all of these things can just be thought about, meditated on. God did exalt a people. And when this man was born, they were in a state of slavery to Pharaoh. But God had a promise that he would exalt this people, and Jehovah would absolutely be glorified by the act of exalting this people, and they together would produce a child named Moses. And then Miriam, this is so interesting. I don't know why I didn't know this about Miriam. I thought her name meant tears or sorrow. I don't know where I got that idea from, but her name means rebellion. And this is very important. I'm not going to dwell on it now, but I have a Bible study all about Miriam, and we'll talk about it after she goes through a little more life. We'll get to her later in the book of Exodus. But that's what his sister's name was, Moses' sister's name was. So she puts, Jochebed puts the baby in this specially designed ark or bassinet that was waterproof. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And I want to point out that it does not say that Jochebed sent Miriam to do this. I grew up with an image of Jochebed telling Miriam, go look after your baby brother. And the Bible doesn't say Jochebed did that, though she could have, but it definitely just says that his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. We'll talk more about that story a little bit later. All right, so then we get to the daughter of Pharaoh came to wash herself at the river along with her maidens. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. By the way, the flags did not mean like we think of flags. It meant like the bulrushes, the I can't think of what they're called now, but along the riverbed, like the stalks of vegetation that have those flowery tips. Okay, she opened it. She saw the child. The child wept. She had compassion on him. She knew it was a Hebrew child. Miriam asked, do you want me to get a Hebrew woman to nurse him? Pharaoh's daughter said, go. The maid went and got the child's mother. So Miriam went and got her mother, Jochebed, which is Moses' mother. Pharaoh's daughter said, take this child, nurse it. I will pay you. So this is so cool how God worked. God ended up paying Jochebed to take care of her own son. Look at the Lord. The child grew, and then Jochebed, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, the Pharaoh's daughter. So the king's daughter, so the princess. And she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. So I think I pointed this out in yesterday's live stream, how it dawned on me during Touch the Future when Brother Woodward was talking about how Exodus in the Hebrew Bible is Shemot. It just made me think, oh, okay, well, I don't know why all that just kind of came to me, but an Egyptian person named this boy, and she actually gave him an Egyptian name, which is Mose. And the Hebrew pronunciation of that is Moshe. And then in English, in our Bible, we say Moses. And it says, because I drew him out of the water, and indeed, Mose does mean to draw. And when we looked at who was likely Pharaoh, The movie Hollywood puts Ramses as Pharaoh, but Ramses would not have been the Pharaoh for so many reasons. Go look at the last stream before this one. And my personal belief is that Amenhotep the second was the Pharaoh when the Exodus occurred. Okay, so when the Exodus occurred is going to be when Moses is about 80 years old. Okay, it could have been Amenhotep the it's actually not third, it's fourth, but someone whose research I trust believes it's Amenhotep the second. But nevertheless, what I did was I wanted to know the possibility of whose daughter this was. Pharaoh's daughter. That's all we know about this woman that saw this baby in the water. So I did a little research into who Thutmose III's daughters were. And his daughters were Bekhetamun, and for short, she's referred to as Becket, and her name means handmaid of Amun. Iset, and that is also pronounced Isis, I-S-I-S, I think. And then another daughter of Thutmose III is Meritamen, which means beloved of Amun. And then another daughter is Nebeti-Unet, which means lady of Dendera. And Dendera is the goddess Hathor. And then the last very interesting daughter of Thutmose III is a Egyptian princess by the name of Nefertiti. Her name means a beautiful woman has come. She is very interesting. If you Google her name, or if you get on YouTube and type in her name, you are going to find lots of really cool, well, I deem them really cool, really cool documentaries about Nefertiti. Because, one of the things Egypt is famous for, or infamous for, however you look at it, is polytheism. Many gods. They believed the Nile was a god. The sun was a god. They believed bugs were gods. They believed, so they had gods everywhere. And Nefertiti and her husband, who was Amenhotep the fourth, and he later changed his name to Akhenaten, I think I'm saying that right. They got married. It was common for siblings to marry. They likely were half siblings, but nevertheless, it was common for siblings to marry to keep the power in the royal family. And these two left the main governing city, went out in the desert and built a whole new palace and city and developed a monotheistic religion. Now, it was a monotheistic religion, and so monotheistic means one God. They only worshiped one God. And that one God they called the sun god Aten. And they're very interesting to archaeologists because they have been very deliberately blotted out from ancient Egypt's history. They literally went in and chiseled off their faces from walls, from their hieroglyph. My brain just left me. The pictures that make up words. Oh my word, I've had such an ADHD brain today. and so they've had to, real archaeologists were very keen to figure out what this missing link was in the history. And so there's a lot of study about them. And I just find it extremely interesting that it's likely that it's one of this man's daughters, so one of this list, who raised Moses as her own. And somehow it affected, I think that interaction with the Hebrew people affected this woman and this man, and they might not have had the God right, but I think all of those plagues that they ended up going through, I think it affected them, and they ended up going out and starting a monotheistic religion. Now, that is 100% my philosophy and imaginations, based on all of the documentaries I've watched about Nefertiti and knowing the research about Thutmose, realizing that Mose is indeed Moses' actual name. And you'd have to see yesterday's stream to see how all this ties together. But anyway, that's just interesting, and it's not biblical. It's my personal thoughts about history. Okay, so I'm going to get off of that now. Let's get back to biblical things. Okay, so then Moses grows up, and he kills an Egyptian that was beating a Hebrew. And then the next day, Moses goes out, and a couple of Hebrews were fighting each other. And they said, you know, are you going to kill us like you did that Egyptian? And then Moses realized, other people know. So that is what caused the thing. That's what caused Moses to leave Egypt to begin with. When Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. Okay? And this is important for a lot of reasons. It follows up later. We're going to get in this chapter, but it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. And so when this king that sought to slay Moses was dead, God's timing was dead on, because the children of Israel were crying because of their bondage. God heard their groaning, and that's when God started turning the heart of Moses and wooing Moses to go and do his job, okay? So now we're going to get into something that is very interesting also, and that is that Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh in verse 15 and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Okay, well, the well kind of skips these 7 daughters who were the 7 daughters of the priest of Midian. They were shepherdesses, and they filled the troughs with water for their father's flock. Then some bully shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses defended them, helped them, watered their flock. Okay, so that's how Moses ties in and becomes a part of this people here in his new life. So something I want us to learn is that this is before we have a priesthood that we know of by knowing the priesthood of Levi, okay? And it's important to know that the word priest does not 100% mean a religious person. The word priest, the Hebrew word is Cohen, and it means a principal officer or chief ruler. So it calls him priest of Midian. He may or may not have been a religious leader. He could have just been a ruler, and the way they referred to a ruler was by using the word Cohen in the Hebrew. But it also does mean mediate in religious service. So he could have somehow been of a religious nature. I tend to believe he was. It says when these girls came to Reuel, their father. So I actually didn't know that their father had another name besides Jethro. I only knew the name Jethro. So this man's name was Reuel, but he also had the name Jethro. My guess is that Jethro was his common name, and that Reuel may have been a family name. Okay, so the first time that we see the name Reuel is in Genesis 36, and this is a son of Esau. Esau, you've got Jacob and Esau. Esau, of course, was the oldest born twin, but he was not the one designated to be leader of the family. So Esau went a different way, but he still knew the same God that Jacob knew. He had the same parents that Jacob had, and he likely taught his family, his children, something about the same thing that Jacob knew. And so Reuel may have been a family, like a last name. So the first time we see the name Reuel is in Genesis 36. And we know also that another name of, somebody's driving through, sorry. We know that another name of Reuel is Jethro. And Jethro means his abundance. Reuel means friend of God. All right. All right. Leave it. Leave it. Okay. Sister Crystal and her girls are doing a huge favor for me today. And they've driven up, and Star wants to go out and be with them. But I'm going to finish this out. Okay. And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And this man, Reuel, Jethro, gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. So that means Moses married a woman named Zipporah. And Zipporah's name means bird. And then Zipporah and Moses had a son, and they named him Gershom. That's in verse 22. Gershom, I'm guessing. And he called his name Gershom. That means foreigner. For Moses said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Okay, now I'm going to end with a really neat spiritual concept here, and that is the Midianites. The Midianites, because that's where Moses went to. He went to the land of the Midians. I'm trying to find where it says that. Dwelt in the land of Midian. Okay. So the first time we know or read about the Midians, the first person named Midian, so this is where the Midianites would have been descendants from, we find in Genesis 25:1, after Abraham's wife, Sarah, dies. So, Abraham and Sarah were married. They had their promised child, Isaac, and Sarah died. And after Sarah died, Abraham had other wives, and he had children with those other wives. And Abraham and Keturah had a son named Midian. Okay? So Midian had children also. And in Genesis 36:35, it's listing Esau's children, and it's kind of giving a bunch of their genealogy. And in 36:35, it just offhand mentions that a Midian was killed. Now, I don't know which Midian it was, but it's just another time we see a Midian in the scripture, okay? In Genesis 37:28, when Joseph is being sold by his brothers, we find that Midianites are called Ishmaelites. All right, so here's another connection to Abraham, but by Ishmael. And the Midianites here are called Ishmaelites. And here's where I want to end today on a little bit of an inspirational note. It's very interesting that it was the Midianites who bought and sold Joseph that put Jacob's family in Egypt to begin with. And it is a Midianite who took in Moses and preserved Moses. These Midianites were not the focus of the Old Testament, yet they were key in preserving God's plan. And where this leads my faith today is that you trust that God's plan will come to pass. Just because you do not know the facilitators of the plan of God, just because you don't understand them, just because you've not personally met them yet, does not mean that God has not preserved a line of people to facilitate his will. God's purpose and plan, the word that he's given you, will be fulfilled. And even if you are not personally able with your hands to facilitate it, you may get frustrated trying to facilitate it yourself. Moses got himself in trouble trying to facilitate it himself. He killed an Egyptian. He tried within himself to save the children of Israel, and it frustrated the plan of God. God didn't need Moses to manipulate anything. God had preserved a people. God had preserved a people to facilitate the plan of God. It was through the Midianites that Joseph got into Egypt so that Joseph could be placed on the throne. And it was through the Midianites that Moses' life was saved so that he could go back to rescue the children of Israel. So hold on to God's plan. Know that even though you can't see it, he's working. Even though you don't understand how, he is working. God has a plan and he will fulfill it for you. In Jesus' name. God bless you. Bye-bye.